in NinjaTrader, and you're going to draw them out for the very first time. They're not going to look like my chart does. When you draw yours, there'll be an anchor line that connects all your other vertical lines together. You're going to want to double click on your anchor line. You're going to want to go down to your price levels where it says levels. And when you click on there, it'll show you all of the vertical lines that you want to see. I've changed mine to 0, 33.33, 66.66, and 100%. And so my 0 and 100 are neutral colors. I think I have steel blue here, but my 33 is green and my 66 is red. When you have that and you hit OK, you're going to want to go to the lower right corner of your drawing objects property box and click template and then save. I save mine as default so that now every time I draw with a Fibonacci time extension, I'm using those levels. So now when I draw my splits, I'm using them in between these signals of 2. So any place I have a signal now separated by a space, the way that I've got mine drawn, I always click on the cell signal first to get the polarity right. And when I do that, I'll ask the question again, which one of these was the best, which one of these options provides the best solution to what we're seeing? So Chris, is this the better solution? We'll call this A. Or is this the better solution? We'll call it B. B. Okay, so B is backwards. Well, here's the good news. In Omnia, we account for the possibility of backwards. Not only can it happen, it does happen. And I can't overstate the importance of that statement. If you know that it's a possibility and does happen, the awareness of it creates an involvement with your chart and with these signals that you didn't used to have before, right? If you've ever gotten a father-son talk or a mother-daughter talk where somebody sat you down and say, hey, listen, here's how life really is. Expect these things to happen. My father had these dadisms that he passed along to us. It's not what you know, it's who you know. We all got that lesson, didn't we? And so these people tried to create an awareness in us of how things usually go so that we're not surprised when these things happen. My oldest son right now is working. It might be going opposite. Are we on the blue wave or are we on the orange wave? Knowing that they switch, right? And so now coming into 2:15 last night, there's this very strong possibility that that signal is going to go down until when? The 4 a.m. signal, which is orange wave up. And these signals emerge from the ether now as unavoidably backwards, near trend reversals. And so if that one is down, what's the white one probably going to do? It's going to have that. And if that one has that, what's the blue one probably going to do? And you see how these sequences now are sort of helping us understand what's going on. And then Danny, I know you have looked at this a lot longer than these guys have. There's the neckline. And what happens when we close above the neckline? We go back to the blue. And now we're not on the opposite wave anymore. And so the white signal goes up and the blue signal goes down and the white signal goes up and the blue signal goes down and the white signal goes up. And here we are on the blue signal and it's going down. So the splits allow us to sort of put our finger on that wave and say, what are you right now? Which one of these things are you? Which gender have you? We'll come back to this. But let me get rid of my drawing there. How do we know when we're descending into red pole? How do we know when the poop is hitting the fan? How do we know when we're going into orange? There are two patterns, and we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I think that's good because the course is sort of steering itself. There are two patterns that start to form. Well, let me just show you on the chart. Where I drew the first arrow, that's called a RDBD. And it's something that I'm going to talk to Ron and the programmers about bringing into the Omnia filter as a way to let us know that it's happening. What I started to notice in my 11 o'clock rants and raves with Ron, if you remember that Skype conversation I showed you, there were two different indicator sequences that almost always appeared before backwards stuff. This one is called a rapid deceleration by dot. And much like the other patterns that you've learned, pattern 4 behaves a certain way, right? Pattern 5 behaves a certain way. An RDBD behaves a certain way. And so what we look for, we draw a line through the primary time signal, in this case 215. I'm now looking in a 2-bar window to the left and a 2-bar window to the right for a sequence of 3 low closes. You see how all those candles are blue low close candles? Anywhere in that 5-bar window where I first see those 3 candles appear is almost always the trigger of the red pole sequence, and gets us closer to the puncture. Where's Dorian? Oh, he's still in his meeting. It tells us that the puncture is coming before the puncture happens. You've seen these all over the place. Now that you know what they look like, you're going to see them even more and identify them faster. And so this becomes its own trading signal. We're now on the close of that third signal right here on that third bar, wherever it is. If it was 1, 2, 3 in the middle or 1, 2, 3 on the right side, the close of that first candle now presents an opportunity where your stop can be above that first candle conservatively or above the signal candle aggressively. And now you are short until the next pattern 4, which is where the bottom comes in, which is over here. You will be surprised how many times that sequence shows up in every market and time frame that you trade. The pattern 4 is now the beginning of that distribution phase, and it will either be the shoulder or the head of that pattern, and is a good first entry exit point. So the RDBD appears all over the place, but it's best traded under a moving average, whichever one you're using. It is a white dot under something. If it's a white dot over something, it's not really a reliable source. Conversely, using the CL market, there is something called a rapid acceleration sell dot. That is the exact opposite of the first one. And forgive me because I'm analyzing on the fly. But Chris, over here on your CL chart, let me see if I can see an earlier version of it. No, I'm watching for sequences with the primary signal here, 2 bars to the right, 2 bars to the left. Danny, can you see where I have 3 closes in a row that are higher closes? White, white, white. When I see that, I'm looking for the sequence to start to reverse and the trend to go up. So in different markets, we'll go back to the ES over here. Watch how often those signals appear now. At 635, low close, low close, low close. That's a rapid deceleration. It's rapidly losing pressure. I actually first called this the Boeing signal. Think of a door exploding off a plane and the plane depressurizing and we have to land. Right? These are weird examples, but they communicate it. There's another one here at 8:35. And so it's communicating. I mean, there's 3 in a row on this one. It's a tradable signal. And it signals that the trend is coming down into a reversal and will start to go into backwards land. Vice versa. And you can see why it would benefit us to have something telling us that it's happened. I call this one an almost one. The signal itself is blue in the middle, but you see how it's got that sequence, Danny, coming up? It's a pre-puncture. And when I see that, I know the next signal is going down. But those can alert us into, let me go back even further and drew all my crappy stuff here. So a rapid accel sell dot, a RASD, and an RDBD, a rapid deceleration blue dot, can signal the entrance into a reverse polarity sequence. Forgive me. Now that I've shown it to you, do you see it on the 6 a.m. signal? It kind of jumps out. There's our primary, and now we're looking 2 bars to the left and 2 bars to the right. And so now when this sequence is activated, ding, 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 we can see that the entry short is on the close of that candle, conservative stop is above here, aggressive stop is above there, and we're short until a P4 appears. And so if that is the entrance into the reverse polarity sequence, then this one is an up, and this one is a down, and this one is an up. And the next one is a what? Down. And now the signals don't look crappy. But returning to what Chris asked about the splits, if this is an up and this is a down, I have to draw it that way, where the splits are backwards. along the way. This is now my P4, right? It appears blue dot with a lower low. So if you're shorting the rapid deceleration by dot here, the exit emerges down there. Yep. Any questions so far? We're going to practice with splits here next. Every week. Let me just get rid of this. We're going to spend a lot of time looking at this, just not yet. I don't use calendar days. My settings for this chart are 7, 14, 11 on the NQ 5-minute chart, and I was using trading days. Every once in a while, one of you come back with a nugget of information that we missed. Data series, yeah, 30. And Dorian is working in the Omnia program. And he said, I'm sorry, the Optimus program. And he came back and he said, hey, you guys know this program works better if you pick trading days instead of calendar days? I said, no. And then I called Ron and I said, what does that even mean if you have a 714 trading days? And he said, I don't know. But it worked better on the statistics. And so all of the stuff that I've been doing with the Omnia signals have been with trading days and not with calendar days. So just a little nugget if you wanted to play with that on your warp chart. That's what I've been showing on here in the signals that generated that equity curve I've been displaying. We'll go over that later. It means you should try it and see what it looks like. I was amazed.
And that's on Omnia.org.
I've been showing it on Omnia, but I haven't been showing it on warp. It's been 714 calendar for 15 years.
Michael, based on your theory of the inverse polarities of the wave,
things are. So let me go back to what we normally use, 714 swing strength 8 on a CL 1-minute chart.
While you're on this one topic, the one thing that some folks want to keep in mind, depending on your time zone, if you're using 714 trading days, there will be the occasional Friday where you may not have signals because it's going to fall on the Saturday before and then the Saturday before that. So trading days, just keep that in mind. There have been a couple of those things where they come out if you're in a certain time zone in the world, your time will run out.
There'll be, Ron was saying there's moments where if you use trading days, like I just showed, because of where you are in the world, you may have 2 weeks in a row where there's no data and therefore no signals. A very interesting question was asked, do the settings really matter? And I asked that question. And with several of you, I used, and I did an experiment that you can try later tonight in your room if you want, or later today after lunch. I went to Google random number generator, and I gave it between a 3 and an 11. And so let's do it. This is a great exercise. Well, no, we'll do the ES, and it worked. It didn't matter what settings I picked. So we'll do a 3-minute ES chart, brand new. Okay, and we'll load the indicator. The more I work with time, the more amazed I am at little things like this. So we'll do trading days. And so now we'll talk to Google. 3 low closes in a row, Danny. Short on the signal here, stop above, aggressive there, stop conservative here. And if that's triggering the sequence, Chris, the next signal should go in the opposite direction. And what does it do at 125? Orange wave, baby. Whee! And then what should it do at 255? Right, goes down. Let's find one more on CL.
So Mike, I'm sorry, before you leave that, sorry.
Hang on. Sure. 455 and 620. I have a rule that says if there's a doji, look at the next candle. Just what Omnia has too, and we'll talk about that. But there's also one here. So, Chris, it would sort of behoove us to build this filter and to automatically flush those things to the surface easier. So now on CL, 1, 2, 3 in that window, aggressive stop underneath this candle for a potential pull up. Conservative would be down here. 620 is over the moving average. 1, 2, 3, the third candle is here. Stop underneath aggressively, stop underneath conservatively until we go through there. And so it triggers, Danny, the reversal sequence now where I'm watching for those heads and shoulder patterns. And I'm calling that a sell, and that a buy, and that a sell, and that a buy, and that a sell. And if this is a buy, mind noodle bender is a pattern 5 buy because it's a brand new opposite high. And that's what we're going to get into later after the break. So to review, and I know this is a lot, but when you see them, you start to see them everywhere. When we're above something and we have 3 consecutive bicandles surrounding or in the 5-bar vicinity of a cell dot, it triggers usually the reversal sequence into the orange wave. When we're below something in a 5-bar window around a bi-dot and we see 3 consecutive low closes, it generally is the trigger for opposite, 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 opposite. And we'll talk more about this sequence and the trend lines and the necklines and that stuff in there. That indicator is looking at the very next candle as its primary filter with this tool to tell us which way is the wave curling. And so going back to our ES example, that last signal was along at 9:39 using that technique. So let's take a 5-minute break, everybody, at home and here. Let's call it 10 minutes. So it's 10 o'clock. I'm going to hit pause on the recording. Isn't a perfect rapid acceleration cell dot. You can see inside of that 5-bar window, we sort of have 3 out of the 5 candles are moving up and it's going higher here. And it's obvious that that red dot is pushing up and not down. And so while Omnia as a plugin, we can put it on Apple and we will put it on Apple, but when we're using it outside of the Warp framework, this trigger, which ties back to the question Danny White asked earlier about how do we know when we're going into a reversal sequence potentially. Once you have that awareness, historically when we were, let's say you guys remember how I used to teach punctures over here. So if we're looking at options in Apple, that puncture not only was deferred, but it was bad. It came up and came right back down. And so understanding the trigger, understanding that the waves can interchange from blue to orange and back again, once we see that departure from normalcy, that departure from normal polarity, Gig and I were talking a moment ago how now we don't have to wait and we can look at that full moon signal as a potential short or look for puts there. And now instead of waiting for calls here and waiting for a bar to be confirmed, we have an understanding that the next sell signal is probably inverted. And now we're looking for that classic head and shoulders pattern, which I think you guys see without my help here already. And then vice versa, now we're in that sequence of everything is backwards until it's not. And so in the case of Apple here, everything is backwards at the trend reversal. And now in present modern day times, it's happening again, where there's our dip down on the first push, there's our dip down on the second push, and now Mike and Danny and I have been working on this for a little while. That seems to be the emerging trend line there on the neck and the shoulder. And so the next signal is a full moon in 7 days, which is likely to drive down now again into a lower shoulder retest and then a potential new moon signal back up above. And here we go. We're going to learn more about the sequence and how it doesn't necessarily have to reverse here and can actually keep going, which is a 1 to 200% move down continuing below the low. So it's not always a trend reversal. But the way that I'm thinking about this, and we're going to look at a few more examples, is that on a much higher time frame, weekly or monthly, there's a ginormous buy signal here. And this can be beneficial to draw in on your chart and just sort of think about the fact that on the weekly, the daily, I don't know what size time frame, there's a counter, I'm trying to use big words, there's a much larger time frame buy signal here right now, and vice versa. There's a much larger sell signal up here on a time frame I've never accounted for or don't have an awareness of. Does that make sense? And so on the lower time frames, I lost my green, the signals start here on the daily. So that's a way I've been using to envision what's happening on those charts. Let's take a look at new moon signal back up above, and here we go, ready to stop, which is scary, which means as of right now, 422 has a capability of being what? It could get to 422 and we could have 3 signals in a row, because that almost always signals the inversion sequence, which leads to higher highs. So looking at a gold daily chart with what we've learned so far, we know that these are all the screenshots. We know that we haven't seen this sequence yet, man. Well, Chris, pursuant to what you asked earlier about the splits and why do we draw them, when I drew them here, normally, nominally, the normal split sequence is the best fit, okay? Meaning this was negative, this is positive, this was negative. So let me ask the peanut gallery here, what does this tell us about Tesla's stock prices in reference to the answer key that we developed? What triggers what's the first trigger of a possible trend reversal in the downside? You'll get there. A rapid deceleration buy down appears before the low starts to settle in, if it settles in. And right now on Tesla, there's no rapid deceleration buy down, not yet. So there's more room for it. And even if this was that, which it's not, it signals there's more room below for that head and shoulders pattern or that accumulation phase to build. So we haven't seen the bottom in Tesla yet, if all of this stuff is correct. Does that make sense? And even if this was that, we know the exit would be a pattern 4, which would have to be a lower low, which means Tesla has to go back below 160 for that sequence to complete. With a more complete picture of these things, we can infer direction and targets and whether or where we are in this sequence. This is the master key of how price moves. These were the juggernauts back in the 1900s, Gann, Wyckoff, and Elliott, and they had all these foundational elements, but I never knew how to put them all together. So if we look at another market, Bitcoin, this sure looks nominal to me right now. The white dots are going up, the blue dots are going down, which means what in terms of its potential? There's tremendous more room for it to go up. And that also implies now that the April 16th signal has the capacity to be one of these. It could turn and go down, sure, but it also has the capacity, if it's going higher, that trigger will sequence, that sequence will trigger the potential rise up into even higher highs where that head and shoulders pattern is likely to form. And so when you're applying these techniques now, it's sort of really interesting to me. We had one back here on, here's an example, guys, of earlier I mentioned that with Gig and Apple, it could keep going down. It doesn't have to reverse and go up. Here's an example in Bitcoin where I believe there was a higher time frame signal. And Danny, it cruised through it. Check this out. You'll see a sequence where everything was backwards. So right here, Tim, right here, and then right here is that sequence. And if I were drawing necklines and trend lines and all of those things, watch what happens when it blows right through that high. So if we cluster everything here, Here's our higher time frame. Nothing breaks down. Down, up, everything's backwards, and then it reverts back to normal. So we had a sell signal here. I was watching for it, and everything was backwards, and I thought we would go down. And then we got another rapid XL buy dot, sell dot, a RASD, and then everything reverted to normal. So the trend is up again, because when the signals look like this, it's that. So the trend, we have, if we all those things, watch what happens when it blows right through that high. So if we cluster everything here, here's our higher time frame, nothing breaks down. Down, up, everything's backwards, and then it reverts back to normal. So we had a sell signal here. I was watching for it, and everything was backwards, and I thought we would go down. And then we got another rapid XL buy dot, sell dot, a RASD, and then everything reverted to normal. So the trend is up. When the signals look like this, it's that. Red down, buy up, red down, buy up, and that's where we're back. So my guess is we're going to see another rapid XL sell dot on the 16th coming up into the end of the month. But we can get in a sequence where it doesn't reverse, it just goes backwards. And now, pursuant to what I told you guys earlier, it's not uncommon for it to be of that range up from the breakout. And we'll get into the setups and how to trade with them. So backwards doesn't necessarily mean reversal. In very strong trends, it can go higher. For example, on the ES daily chart, we had a period of that backwardsness. Let me see if you can, yep, we had it right here. It went down. There's a rapid decel buy dot, 1, 2, 3, short it on the close. Then we're looking for it to go up here and down here, and it didn't go up here. It started going normal, and then this one started going normal. So this sequence here flips up, and now we're up and down and up and down. But now watch, here's the one I was looking for. Rapid XL sell dot. Gary reminded me that I don't have the font big enough on here. I knew I'd remember.
I overcome my disability.
But now watch right here. There's our signal in a 5-bar window, 2 to the left, 2 to the right. Do we see a sequence of 3 candles in a row? It pops up. So this tells us we should be going into that Omnia sequence, right? The Rev Pole. The very next candle, true to form, closes on that doji. Gig says, I don't have to wait for a bar close. I can have a put on the close of that day, and it doesn't disappoint, goes in the money on the very next day. But it's obvious from the fact that all the candles are up here that it didn't reverse. And so we're in this sequence now of from here to here, the very next buy signal. Watch, we're still in backwards land. The close of the February 13th candle goes up the very next day. We don't have to wait for a confirmation day. We know we're in the backward sequence. And then the very next signal on the 19th, right here, it does go down and then closes up as a doji. So what I'm normally watching for, and we're going to get into this more tomorrow, is a head and shoulders sequence. And at that point, Danny, we had, I don't know why I keep saying your name. I get locked in on somebody in a webinar and I just stay there. It's a coping mechanism. Yeah, but you notice here how I'm watching the pulses 1, and then we have a higher pulse 2. This is usually the reversal for me. And then we actually get one more turn here. And if I'm drawing necklines, it's very aggressive, but there's something there at that point. It never accommodates the reversal and goes, no, bang, straight up. So pursuant to what we said earlier, if there was a higher time frame signal, and here's a noodle baker. If you like noodle bakers, this is a good one. On a much higher time frame, we can still reference the answer key and say, hey, if this was a daily, maybe on the month, the weekly, or the monthly, there was a sell signal here, and the market went into a consolidation range and went sideways. Well, now on the answer key, that's this signal here. And if it didn't reverse and go down and it kept going up, you saw it. I'm watching for head nods. You're getting it. If it breaks above that range, it's a trend continuation. And so the ES, I was certain this was going to reverse, Mike, and go back down. Right? It had all the classic hallmarks, a shoulder, a head, and I'm waiting for that breakdown in the close below, and it just kept going. And I was like, okay,